The X-Men are one of the greatest superhero teams of all time. For my money, the greatest superhero team of all time. And Joss Whedon and John Cassaday were on a mission to prove that and to restore the X-Men to a superhero team with their time on Astonishing X-Men. That is the subject of the final piece of X-Men month here at the Comics Pals headquarters. We are closing things out with a book club on Astonishing X-Men. We have a full X cast here tonight. We have Cale.
What up, X-Dogs?
Marco. Tyler.
Okay, we're just doing sound effects now? Is that the deal?
That's
Okay.
me being astonished.
Oh.
Boy, oh boy, dude.
Got it.
You got to work on your bits.
Him to be as bad as Phil.
It's
the goal. It's the gold standard.
it's as bad, Cale. We're just better at dealing with it. And I'm Sean. And you are you. Thank you for joining us, whether it is live or in the future. We appreciate you. We're here to talk about Astonishing X-Men. Now, this is, of course, as we said, by Joss Whedon, written by Joss Whedon, with art by John Cassaday, colors by Laura Martin. Laura Martin is probably my favorite colorist. Her and Marta Gracia are just like neck and neck for me. Love Laura Martin.
I mean, I love Jordy too, but like Laura Martin is one of those. It's like classic Marvel era of when I was reading comics colorist. You know what I mean? It kind of really sets a tone for just good Marvel comics, in my opinion.
And we've got letters from Chris Eliopoulos. So this is really like a who's who of a very specific time in comics, minus Joss Whedon, because Joss is sort of a tourist in comics. In terms of as a creator, you know, certainly very well established as a writer outside of comics. He, of course, is notable for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Serenity, you know, Angel, all that great stuff. And then later on, we go to do things like the Avengers and, you know, endless things. And this is at the height of his powers, pretty much. This is at a time when, you know, the media has anointed Joss Whedon as the king of mainstream storytelling, mainstream entertainment. He is the guy. He is the geek god, if you will. And he did some comics prior to this. He did Frey, which was a Buffy story set in the very deep future. He also did limited stuff with Dark Horse, and as far as Angel and Serenity and stuff like that. But this was really his first big foray into like big comics. You know, certainly big two comics. And I think that at the time that was, you know, something that was really exciting for people. I wasn't reading comics when Astonishing first started, so I didn't know about all that. But yeah, so Joss jumping into the X-Men blew people's minds. This was remarkable for the fact that it was a celebrity writer coming on board, but also that Whedon was the first heavy hitter to step in after the incredible run that Grant Morrison and Frank Whiteley had on New X-Men. Real quick, has anyone here read this before?
Not in its totality. Just the first 2 volumes, actually.
I read it as it was coming out, but I don't think I've read it since.
Yeah, I'm with Cal on this one. I read it as it was coming out, but like I had jumped in halfway through. I mean, this what started in 2004, right?
It started in 2004, July 2004 to May 2008.
So I probably read it when issue 3 came out 5 years later. That's a joke. But yeah, I remember reading at least the end of it for sure. I remember reading that. I think I did a podcast about it, actually.
Yeah, I caught up with it at some point. Once I started reading comics, the notion that there was a Joss Whedon comic was just insane to me. The first creator of anything really that I felt connected to. And so him jumping into comics was crazy. Now, he has a connection to the X-Men, which is, I think, evident throughout the work, but he goes pretty deep. So he was asked, how far back does your fascination with the X-Men go? And he said, I really didn't start until around issue 98. So I was there for Cockrum just turning out the epic in a huge way, then Byrne stepping in and blowing our socks off. I sort of disappeared a little bit before Byrne did. I happened to pick it up right when Paul Smith came on board, right before Live Free or Die, at the end of the Brood Saga, which is to me one of the most important issues I've ever read, which is just the issue of them waiting to basically die before the big epic. To me, there's more Buffy in that than any comic I know because it's just them talking about who they are and religion and sex. I was just blown away that you could do that with a comic, and I just love Paul Smith's pencils. So this is all during the Chris Claremont era, just so we're all on the same page. He went on to say, I was gone to a faraway land until Grant Morrison and Frank Whiteley brought me back. I can't stress enough, and I don't think it's been stressed enough, what an amazing run they had on that book. Most of the stuff I reference, the really emotional stuff, and a lot of the interesting ideas came from what they built. Obviously, at least two of the members from the Hellfire Club are from their run. Morrison era for me was what absolutely brought me back to the X-Men, and he gave me so much rich stuff to draw off. So as I said earlier, this run comes right off the heels of what Morrison and Quietly and other artists did with New X-Men, which was considered to be absolutely groundbreaking. That came off of what Claremont had done, which was, of course, similarly groundbreaking. But the difference is that New X-Men upended the X-Men in a way that Marvel themselves weren't all that pleased with in the end. It was a big series that dealt with a lot of heady subjects and was really interested in the overall idea of mutants and what that could look like in the future, not dissimilar actually from the way that Hickman kind of explored them. And actually, there are a lot more connections than I even realized between what Hickman did and what Morrison did. But save that for another podcast. There were a lot of people, though, who weren't that happy with Morrison's run. And they wanted the X-Men back. Just like there are a lot of people who feel that way now, as we sit in the in-between Hickman stuff and what's to come next. And here comes Whedon, and here comes John Cassidy, who are going to bring the X-Men back to basics. And that is exactly what they did. Cale and Tyler, you've both read New X-Men, right?
No,
I never finished it.
no.
I've read a majority of it, but it's also been a while since I've read it. So
Yeah, half of the
Just
run, I think.
always missed me.
Wow. Next time X-Men month rolls around, New X-Men needs some votes.
Yeah.
Listen, we're in charge here. Let's push it a month.
Well, New X-Men was incredibly groundbreaking, but it was alienating. And it was a very long run that had a lot of twists and turns and, you know, the Morrison stuff that you would expect. And so one of the mission statements for this book was really to bring it back to one and get back to superheroics, good guys versus bad guys, and the familiar fare. And Marvel sought out an artist who they felt could bring these characters to life in that way, and John Cassaday, who at that point had done Planetary, and of course that is a legendary book in its own right. He had done 6 issues of Captain America, and he met Joss Whedon by doing covers for the Serenity comic. So that was the connection there. And I wanted to read just a couple of things that Cassaday had to say as we get into the book. So he was interviewed by the Pulse, and they asked him, what kind of new designs or elements are you incorporating into Astonishing X-Men? And Cassaday said, actually, at the first meeting Joe and I had, I told him that if I agreed to do the book, I'd want to put them in costumes and shake it up. And without me knowing it, that's exactly what Joe and Marvel were wanting. Costumes, not uniforms. I like the leather look of the movies as well as Grant's run, but for the comic, it's time for change. My designs deal with the costumes looking less like painted on spandex and more realistic. More like thicker protective material that a hero might truly wear. Still tight, but not paper thin. I'm keeping it as simple as possible. early on, certain parties involved were looking to have the characters loaded up with all sorts of pouches and extra belts and stuff. Pointless stuff. I did away with practically all of that and did my best to streamline the outfits. These people are about what they can do themselves. They don't need pouches and 5 armbands and headbands and 6 buckles on their head. You get the idea. All along, I wanted to bring the designs back to where they were in the first place. I think we've gotten too far away from the simplistic beauty of the original designs.
Huh. And it's interesting because I would say Cassiday's art is sleek, and that very much is what the outfits and some of the aesthetic kind of represent. There's even some of the ship designs, simple curves, not a lot of going on. Back in the day, you'd have, especially for ships, wires. You'd have buttons all over the place. And to your earlier point on the pouches, it was simple, and even the character designs for some of the villains introduced, for sure, easy.
I love the redesigns in this. The astonishing era X-Men, like that Beast is iconic for me. I know Cat Beast is a little bit of a hotly debated topic among X-Men fans, but I sometimes when I think of Beast, like this is probably the second thing I think of. And like the choice to make them costumes instead of uniforms, I think works for the early parts of the book because that's what they're trying to do in the text as well. And I really enjoyed that. I liked the redesign of Wolverine to. It's subtle. It's subtle. The blue and gold, but I think like you can see how this changes. But the one that always jumps out to me is Cyclops. I think this is my favorite Cyclops costume. Marvel Legends put out a version of this figure last year, I believe, and it's when I think of like if I hear Wolverine calling Cyclops slim, this is the costume I think of. And I always think of like Wolverine and Cyclops together as like a duo. I see them in these costumes, so it's pretty iconic for me.
And even the Wolverine, and I think beyond the blue and gold, the ears, things are like he's a little squat, right? Like he's meant to be this like little feral guy, and that comes across even when you're just looking at his face. Like there's almost like a squishing to it.
Yeah, and you talk about Wolverine. This costume is the one that we're getting in Deadpool and Wolverine. He has sleeves in the movie. That's because of an illness or a health issue that Hugh Jackman has. But outside of that, it is almost a 1-to-1 perfect replication of this costume. I think that Cassidy absolutely nailed the mission statement on his end of things. Just delivering costumes that are sleek and cool, but are comics as well. They're not afraid of that. They're colorful, but they're not wacky either. They look like superheroes. And the Avengers don't typically wear, they're not typically like color coordinated, and neither are the League. The X-Men are the team that you get that kind of thing from. And not always, but this was certainly an era where you did, and I thought that was awesome. But again, even through the comments that Cassidy makes, it's pretty clear that Marvel from the word go wanted a simpler team that was based in superheroics once again. And that decision making comes down even to the characters that were chosen. So the roster is Cyclops, Emma, Wolverine, Beast, Kitty, Colossus, and then later we get Armor. And minus Colossus and Armor, those are all characters that were heavily, heavily featured in Morrison's era. And as Whedon said, that was the last time he really, that's his era other than Claremont of X-Men books. So in his mind, he's just piggybacking right off of what Morrison did. But this is what he had to say, Whedon did, on how he decided on the team. The thing that I like most about the characters that I focused on is that I have a very specific rule. No powers that I categorically don't understand. This team is very, very grounded. I don't even have anyone on it who can fly, which I love. Not that I don't want to tell epic science fiction stories, because I do, but at the same time, I want to understand when I open a book, okay, this guy's got claws, that guy's got eye beams. That kind of simplicity is important to me. This is a very simple roster. Was it too simple for you? What did you guys think of the team makeup and the characters that were chosen?
I think it allows for a lot of drama, and I think that's something that Whedon was probably pulling from the Claremont stuff. There's a lot of just interpersonal relationships, and so from a power perspective, I think you got a bruiser, you got the smart guy, you got your tactician, you have your psychic. Like it plays into these X-Men tropes and these kind of what you would assemble a team about. But within that, right? How does Emma, first of all, being in this affect the dynamics between Kitty, affect the dynamics for Beast. The first interaction with Wolverine and with Cyclops, man, it just breaks out. It devolves into a fight right there and then in the school grounds. Like, so I thought the selection here, it's classic. It's classic, refreshed with like a new coat of paint, and then you're in a new kind of environment, which is a really interesting setting.
I mean, I kind of like it too. I like, I mean, 2004, so maybe it wasn't really on the forefront of people's minds. It's a little white, but that's pretty much the only real criticism I can give it. I mean, I like how Kitty's in this because it's a Joss Whedon book, so you need to have your young, spunky POV female character. I think kind of bringing Kitty back to the fold to be a little more mature than how she was previously, written was great. And I think immediately throwing Scott, Emma, and Wolverine in the mix is just like a powder keg. Which great drama. As you described, like, oh, I didn't get a flyer in it. My head's like, well, that just seems tactically bad. But you got Emma in there, you can do whatever. Yeah, I think it's a good lineup. I like how small it is too. From what I remember, like Morrison's thing just got big. You got a whole school, you're dealing with all these students and everything, and then it just get a little unwieldy, and you got multiple teams with X-Men at some certain points. Your gold, your blue team. This was just like, all right, this is a superhero team, almost more Avengers-like in terms of its direct makeup. I think it was a smart move.
Yeah, so this was my first X-Men book. So outside of the films and the animated series, like there were people that I sort of wanted to see, but then as I read it, and the quote you read, Sean, about him not using powers he doesn't understand, that makes a lot of sense as you're reading it, because it's like, again, like you understand where everybody's at. And with this limited cast, he really makes you care about everything that happens to everyone.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Whedon chose his roster very, very intelligently, and he chose it largely based on drama, which I think is the exact right decision to make when you are putting together a team of superhero characters. And I think a lot of times power and power set is at the forefront of the focus, and then you buy the book and it's dry. There's just no heat to it. And with this, say what you will, and we're going to say a lot, but there's drama and intrigue and character dynamic dripping off of every single page and panel. That is a Joss Whedon hallmark.
This is the criticism we have of like current Avengers books. It's like all the heavy hitters are on one team, and there's no drama. And there's also no drama because there's way too much power in the book almost. How do you have them have, how do you do villains with that stuff? So yeah, I think that worked out in this book.
And I think to that even, like they all stay, they're all on the same mission. Like you don't have them sort of disparately doing whatever their own thing, fighting over here, fighting over there. Like it's a unit, and the X-Men are there to solve a problem, whether it be within the mansion itself or be it off planet. They're together and they're being a unit.
Yeah. They feel like a team, and they're always that, which
Right.
I agree. I did appreciate that. We're about to dive into this whole book right here. We're going to start from the first arc, Gifted, and get all the way to Unstoppable and talk about the ins and outs. We've got more quotes to reference and all of that. Thank you for joining us. If you are enjoying what we do, make sure you are subscribed to our channel. We appreciate everybody that does that. Like the video. Likes help us out a ton, and they are free to do. Everybody here should smash that like button if you are enjoying the conversation so far. Patreon.com/thecomics pals is the absolute best way to support us. All your comments we appreciate. We're going to read and talk back to you guys as far as all your comments and thoughts on Astonishing X-Men towards the end. And we're also going to make an announcement about what is to come with the book club. What will July bring? What are we introducing in July? It's going to be a lot of fun. Stay on the hook for that as we talk about this first arc. So the opening arc deals with the threat of a mutant cure that is created by Dr. Kavita Rao. This is, of course, after Morrison's run, which saw the deaths of 16 million mutants on Genosha, and just before the decimation of mutants in House of M, where the population was reduced from just under 1 million to 198 total mutants. Now, that occurs in 2005, which sort of undercuts what it is that Whedon was doing here just 1 year earlier. Now, the idea of a mutant cure is not, especially not today, is not a new concept. But at the time, it had only really been done a handful of times. Most notably in the 90s, there was a story arc that did something like that. But it wasn't that well explored territory. So when Joss introduced the concept, it was a much bigger deal, let's say, than it would be today. And it was supposed to pack a heavy punch. To me, as a reader at the time, it certainly did. The concept that the mutant, gene is a disease to be cured is compelling and interesting. And then the reactions of the characters to that are what I think takes it to the next level. Beast, right up front, is revealed to have a desire to maybe do this to himself, which I think should surprise a longtime reader, but not somebody who was reading New X-Men. It's one of the most direct ways that Whedon plays off of what Morrison had done, because Beast underwent his secondary mutation under Morrison's pen, which made him more cat-like and almost have a feral state that he could go into, similar to what Wolverine has. And so Beast in this book is like, hey man, I want to be a normal dude. I used to be a jock. Now I'm a beast. I'm a furball. He's the only one on this team whose mutation is visible and physical. And so of course he would be the one to want to take the cure.
And I like the juxtaposition between him and Colossus and Emma, who can switch between those states. It's not static, and he doesn't have to, or they don't have to stick to just the one. And if anything, I've always thought like that Beast, it made sense for Beast from a story perspective, just because he wasn't blue to start with, right? He was just a big burly dude. Then he fucking got hairy and blue.
That's true, because I was thinking about Nightcrawler as we were just talking about it. And I was wondering, like, what would his sort of reaction in this, like, if he were in this book, what would it be? But I think you're absolutely right, Marco. That's something people forget, is that Beast was just a big dude, and then he became the blue guy.
Yeah. So that as an angle has always, I think, worked for him, and considering he's so intelligent, right? Like that's probably something that has crossed his mind. So you can even play into that. And it's interesting that you say that this was kind of like a novel idea, because reading it, I appreciated it for what it is, and as I was reading it in the moment, but it definitely felt like, yeah, okay, I get it. I've seen this. Like this isn't blowing my socks off, but uh, that doesn't take away from it doesn't get minus points for that.
I also like the bit of the whole beast of it all, where not only does he has a visible mutation and it's not who he actually was, but then there's the future that's kind of scary to Hank. That like, all right, I mutated once, I mutated twice, I mutated a third time. Can it keep going? And then that constant, monster versus man, Jekyll and Hyde kind of debate it is Beast's internal struggle throughout most of this run. And I think that's just good just storytelling that really lends itself to the character of Hank McCoy.
Yeah, I think one of the strengths of this run for me is the way in which Whedon was able to identify how could each of these characters serve the story, on an emotional level and hopefully a practical level. And I think, especially with this first arc, and maybe less so later on, you see why Beast is on this team. Emotionally, he's dealing with the prospect of being human again, visibly so. But also, he's the scientist. He's the doctor on the team. He's the one who can reverse engineer this, figure out what they're even looking at. And so I really like that Beast was centered in that way. I thought that was really smart.
He fills the Giles or like the shepherd of the team to
Sure.
the elderly, guy with the glasses, really.
There are a few major things about this first arc that I want to tackle. The first of them is bringing Kitty Pryde back into the fold. Tyler already referenced the fact that, this is Joss Whedon, and it wouldn't be a Whedon story without a young woman as the protagonist, as that's typically the route he takes. And he has talked about how Kitty Pryde was one of his favorite characters in the, earlier X books, which makes a lot of sense given when he was reading them during the Claremont era. So Kitty, at this point in time, has actually not been a member of the X-Men for some years. And she returns to the team because Whedon wanted to use her, but he uses her once again in a very intelligent way. She's been gone throughout the entirety of Grant and Quietly's new X-Men. And so Emma Frost being a part of this team would be weird to her. That would be something that would cause her to be hostile, which she immediately is. And that's really smart because there are a lot of people that read this run that did not read a new X-Men. So she is them. Kitty is the lapsed reader who sees Emma and says, "Whoa, what the hell are you doing here? I haven't read comics since Chris Claremont. How are you here?" And I thought that was so smart.
Grounds us.
Yep.
And even that, I think it's the first issue where she's walking through the school and you can see the projections of Claremont era panels.
Yeah.
In it. It's like, hey, we know what you liked. This is a little more familiar for you.
But again, that's him leaning on that knowledge, right? Like X-Men, was it no Professor Xavier, whatever the right like
Is a jerk.
goes at him. Yeah, is a jerk. Like you have the little moments like you're going back through memory lane in the same way that she's going back through memory lane, and that feels really good. It's interesting because I didn't know that she had been gone for that long because most of the stuff that I read was Claremont, this, and then kind of in between stuff until Hoxpox. So for me, I was kind of like, oh yeah, what's the big hubbub? I guess she is coming back, but that's cool because I'm like, oh wait, damn, I remember that. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, neat. That's fun. I can attach myself to that emotionally.
Yeah, yeah. She's fantastic. She's pretty much the main character throughout this, and I can't think of a time that I have enjoyed Kitty more than I do throughout this. She's a great foil for Emma. I like the fact that she's generally, you know, she's got the right idea. She is the quintessential young X person, but now she's grown up a little bit and she's more mature and sure of herself and everything is gravy until she sees Colossus. And I love how the reintroduction of Colossus just flips the script for her and, you know, makes her have to reconsider a lot of different things. A great choice on Whedon's part to bring Colossus back, except for the fact that it doesn't make any sense.
It's the weakest retcon I've ever seen. It's like, oh, we just brought him back. Like they don't describe anything.
Even having not read an X-Men book before, I felt that. I was like, I know I'm circling something here. I don't know what it is, but this just isn't right.
It's very flim-flammy. And so let's establish where Colossus has been, right? So Colossus was actually killed off by Scott Lobdell in 2001.
Cale's favorite.
I had to stop so I could watch Cale's reaction. He sacrificed himself to activate a cure for the legacy virus. His resurrection here obviously gives the story a relationship with some drama and angst between him and Kitty. The big issue is that we see Colossus get cremated by Kitty Pryde and his ashes are spread out. So my man is gone. There's not even a body. And they had to flim-flam their way to say that it was a clone or it was someone else's body or whatever. Yeah. That was just bogus.
I'm not even sure they really explain it. Colossus just it was switched out.
Yeah, literally, that's all they give us.
His body was switched out. Yeah.
What's the big deal?
What was frustrating in that, especially as you keep reading through and how integral he becomes, it also feels very contrived because he plays into this huge, larger narrative, and you know, how many mutants died in Genosha, right? Like
16 million.
This was the guy.
Yeah, the guy that turns into metal, right? Like,
okay, cool. Like
the one that died 20 years ago.
Like, I understand.
How is the prophecy?
I understand the point of bringing him because there was some flirtation between him and Kitty in Claremont's run.
A lot more than that.
But they never actually do the deed. They finally do it in this book.
Yeah, but it was more than flirtation.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's nice to bring that back, but it does seem like, all right, Kitty's our main, I guess, on this team, and we need to have a love interest. Let's bring Colossus back, and it, story be damned. And I don't care much for Colossus in this book, to be honest. I do think he is a MacGuffin. He doesn't do anything of import until the last arc, really. He gets his ass kicked constantly. And I don't feel like the voice for him is that great either.
I have comments about the voice overall, I think.
All right. Well, let's keep running through some of the major things just from this first arc. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that Professor Xavier is not here. And they continuously reference that he's gone. And his absence through the first arc, it feels like there's a specter over the book that Professor Xavier is not present. And they don't really give any good reason why he's not there. He's just not. And I haven't read this in a while. So my reaction was, all right, well, it feels like Whedon just didn't want to have to worry about how to use Professor Xavier. So he just took him off the board. But I do think there is a good reason why Professor X isn't here. And I think it has a lot to do with Cyclops. So Cyclops as a character, I feel like Whedon had a particular desire to rehab. Because Cyclops is viewed typically as a Boy Scout, kind of a lame duck character. And a lot of people were not happy with him post New X-Men. He came across really bad during Morrison's time on New X-Men. He essentially cheated on Jean, and it just wasn't a good look. So here, one of the very first things that Cyclops says once things start going to shit is the professor would have had a plan for this. It's one of his earliest statements. And it very clearly puts Cyclops under the professor. He's one of the students. He's not the guy to know what to do. He's the guy to follow the order that's given by the guy that knows what to do. That's the position of Cyclops in this first arc. That is a very different position than he is in at the end. The story of Cyclops that gets told here is really great, and I think it goes a long way to getting us to the Cyclops that we have now. Or at least maybe you could say the Cyclops that we had before House and Powers.
Yeah,
because he
okay.
does become more of a lapdog again at that point.
Yeah.
But the 15 years between this and that, yes, very much so. This is where it started.
I think it helps to, like, X-Men 97 kind of has that version of Cyclops. The more modern take on Cyclops is of the leader, and this story is of him trying to become that. It's trying to fit into his dad's shoes, really. I'm not sure it sticks the landing, but it is a constant storyline throughout it.
It also felt like it was kind of a, I guess, kind of like a red flag for, oh, Emma's maybe controlling, right? Like maybe she has some hand. That's why he's maybe a little more meek. And so I thought there was something there from Whedon to be like, he is questionable. His intentions are questionable. His actions are going to be questionable. So also watch your eye out for him.
People were questioning Cyclops' behavior because of his connection to Emma.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the first arc gives us Ord. It introduces us to him, the concept of the break world, and Ord wants. I don't even remember how much of this is actually in the first arc, but Ord wants to, figure out which mutant is going to be the one who's going to destroy the break world, and so he helped develop this cure, gave her the technology or whatever, so that they could just depower all of the mutants. The depowering of the mutants, I think that is strong throughout the first arc, but then it completely vanishes.
Yeah. Do we get no, like, even the whole Beast has a cure that he's holding on
Cure
to?
business. Yeah.
That never gets resolved, right?
No fallout.
It's he basically just says, I'm gonna keep it for a rainy day and we'll see what happens.
I guess
But even
sunny
at
skies,
large,
the rest of it.
Even at large, people are just, oh yeah, we've lost a couple students to like people because they got the cure or something. That's all. It just gets like brushed under the rug.
Yeah. It's funny. I just flipped through my copy of the first trade, and there's a shot of Cyclops here that looks very much like Cassidy making fun of what people wanted from this run. Whoever he was referencing that wanted all the patches and pouches.
Whoever.
Yeah. So what'd you guys make of this first arc?
I really liked the first arc, actually. I like there's that one shot, and I had it on the stream, of when they first reveal the costumes. It's at like canted angle, and they're walking over to the Blackbird. And I think in my mind, as I reminisce about this book before I reread it, that's what I thought of, that shot. And the idea that the book posits at the very beginning, that they want to be a superhero team and do superhero things, I really like that. And I like how they kind of get to do that. There's a bit of a, they're being superheroes. They're teaming up with I think it's in the first arc, Fantastic Four sometimes, and just being a little more present in the Marvel Universe. I really enjoyed that, to kind of contextualize the X-Men as still being part of the Marvel Universe, because a lot of the times, especially before this, they felt outside of that. I really like that. I don't care much for Ord. I think he's a very generic kind of villain. Even his design isn't the greatest. But as an intro arc, I actually really enjoy it. I think they do some really fun things here. I also think this is the best this run gets. I think it kind of devolves a bit, but I still enjoyed the first arc of this a pretty decent amount.
It's fun. I think it drives a lot of, again, those interpersonal dynamics. It just pushes that, because the entirety of the arc is we're going to do superheroics, while I'm kind of mad at you, while I'm also questioning you, while I'm upset at you, like, and still dealing with all that. So those moments are fun. I definitely agree with regards to Ord. He's all right. Like Roboters in the chat, feels like a Star Trek villain. It's just a generic kind of alien dude, and um, I think once you get deeper into the mission statement, also kind of gets off the rails as to like why he's even there, and I think there's as a package, these arcs work, and this first arc works really well. But as you probably try to like untangle some of those threads, you start to see how flimsy is not the right word because it's all well crafted, but how maybe convenient some things are, and even contrived is too far. Like, but um, it plays very cleanly.
And I think it has a clear MO that
Mm.
never gets followed eventually. Like the idea that this is a superhero team is a big part of this first arc, and they never really go any further with it.
The extent is that they fight a couple of big monsters, and that's it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I've always kind of felt that this first arc is frustrating because, especially coming off of the first X-Men film, you know, that whole thing is, or is it number 2? 3?
Three.
Based on, the mutant cure. And then I'm pretty sure we see it in the animated series too.
Yes.
So it just like, it felt like a, you know, um Beast aside, that first arc felt sort of well trod. Oh, a mutant cure. Yeah, I bet everybody would like to take that. And it just like I like that Beast has a conflict about it, but it makes me think of like, Wolverine's objections to it, and it's like, well, yeah, of course the guy who heals off of everything he does and can drink all he wants, and his only problem is, he's a little short. Like, yeah, of course he's having a great time. You know, it just that that overall sort of MacGuffin conflict has never really sat right with me.
To that point, even you would think there'd be a bit more deliberation on Cyclops' end. His whole world is red, right? Like maybe there's an angle there to explore. Like you could dive deeper into these subjects, but the surface is only ever touched.
I don't agree with that. I think that there's a very obvious reason why the other mutants don't care for the cure and Beast would. And I don't think that the book needs to spend too much time exploring that. Cyclops doesn't have a struggle with his world being red. It's not a, like that's just not a big deal for him. And the book does dive into some of that stuff with Cyclops later on, but there's just not really like I feel like that would have the opposite problem to be creating drama where there is none. The mutants that who's why would like if you could heal from any wound or take your glasses off and just blow someone away, why would you not want that, right? So the mutant cure concept often works when you have characters like Beast or Leech or Beak or people that have physical afflictions or aren't or don't have powers. I think the book spends like this individual volume spends a fine amount of time on the cure. For me, the problem is that it doesn't deal with it after that. And it's a really big thing to just bring into the fold and then leave on the cutting room floor.
Especially when the idea is that they're, and like Tyler said, their thesis statement here is they're supposed to be a superhero team, but they're going back to deal with sort of big time mutant politics and like mutant eugenics, like that's not quite a superhero issue, whatever you call the X-Men, right? Like they should be fighting Magneto or whatever, or big monsters as a superhero team. That that mutant cure feels bigger than superhero.
Um, Also, I wanted to say that the Last Stand movie, from what I was able to find, that mutant cure story was actually inspired by this. So it goes the other way.
Oh, is that right? Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Well, even just by time, this came out in 2004, and that was 2006. But yeah, so I think this first arc is brilliant, largely because of the strength of Whedon's writing and the absolute juggernaut that Cassaday is. Backed up by Laura Martin, it's really just a phenomenally gorgeous book. Every panel is particular and deliberate. These characters feel, appropriately like big, like scaled. Every panel with Emma on it, she just looks like $1,000,000. Like these characters they're just astonishing.
The the thing about Cassaday's art in this, and I think in hindsight, I always thought of his Emma. I always thought it was Cyclops, but the Wolverine is what jumped out to me this time. I think his ability to emote is more than I remember it being.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think of Cassaday now, and sometimes I think about Uncanny Avengers. And I think of Red Skull pulling out Xavier's head, or brain rather, and everyone kind of just looking default. But the emoting that Cassaday does in this is great. His ability to do Wolverine, and I have a page up from the first arc where Wolverine's eyes are just cartoon white, just fully white, but he's emoting almost in a Spider-Man way with his eyes. That just works so well. I think the Cassaday art in this is because it's consistently good, even towards the end.
I
Yeah.
really don't. I really don't like this art.
What?
I've never been a fan. I agree on the earlier points that the designs and everything are really sleek, and to his credit, like he does make the costumes and the architecture and the environments and all that look really good. But like on Marco's background, look at like Kitty's face and then like Colossus's face. It's just like I hate his faces.
Uh, they they work their moments where things don't go well with the faces. One of the first, I think in the first issue, where they're all sitting on the islands of Hawaii, and then you have this moment of Kitty's like raises her hand. The fingers are like bulky and whatever, and she's kind of like scrunched up and stuff. There's small moments like that throughout the book. I think from a form perspective, everything's done really well. I do agree that he could be very expressive in how he represents each of these characters, but there are some moments where like I don't know what happens. He just like loses the angle, the perspective on something, and it kind of falls apart.
Dude, look at this.
I
And
those
that's a
it's a
good
good
one.
one. It's a good
Although
one.
look at Emma's face there. Like
She
He
looks
has these
fucking
like
tight. She's pissed.
got these
She's stone
lines,
faced.
dude. The killer for me is the art. I mean, it's the colors. Laura Martin on these, I cannot swallow. Like I despise it. It's this,
What?
dude.
whoa.
It is this. It is this
Not what I thought
style.
that meant.
Yeah, me neither.
I was like, what?
It is this style from these like early 2000s books where there's always some kind of like light source in your face. There's always a sheen to things. Like a polish on it when I feel like people's faces aren't that smooth. There's texture, there's grain. Um, it
You-
happens across the board.
Can do you have an example? Can you?
I mean the page that's up right now, right? Like right above Wolverine's eyes, there's he has a shine on top of his where his eyebrows would be in the same way that on his forehead there's a shine. It just looks like somebody. It looks like when like you see my face is kind of like there's my light, but like you move the light away, there's an extra shininess onto my face that feels redundant.
As I'm looking at this page, I think I see what you mean, Marco. Like even if you look at Wolverine, the light source doesn't seem uniform across. Like his butt is lit from behind, but the top of his head is lit down too. So where is the light source coming from? I can see that. And also, like, not everything needs to have a light source in a giant page, because some things might not be hitting the light directly. So I can get that.
Columbo Marco hates the shiny in colors. This is well established. And I saw Gavin earlier. Gavin, if you know the technical term for what this is, please let me know because so I can properly criticize this.
Well, you prefer a flat coloring as opposed to like gradation, I think.
Well, I mean, you can have the gradation, but I think it comes down to the contrast in the light and the dark, not necessarily how you have your values across the board.
If we're just
Or
gonna
how
call
you
it
spread them, rather.
one thing I will say about the art, and I did say I liked it. Cassidy has like 2 hairstyles for guys.
The hair is kind of
It's
for
like
the
buzz
women,
cut
it's also like
or I just woke up. Those are the 2.
I want to see I would want to see just inks on this. I've always thought that Cassidy has really good inks.
I can't. Laura Martin hate? That's nuts.
Damn, you got Sean gooped.
Miss me.
That's nuts.
Yeah, Columbo, you're right. Last week, same thing.
All right. Who cares? Jesus. The thing about this first arc though, and I think it's strong throughout, but I think it's most on display here, is just Whedon's ability to tap into these characters. He really has an understanding of who they are during this particular arc. And for me, I think it's consistent with what we were just getting before with New X-Men. And everybody is, they are filtered through the Whedon filter, but I don't think it's as strong as it would go on to be later down the road. This is pretty much right off the heels of Buffy being done. And obviously, Buffy is a Whedon creation, but the characters do have distinct voices, which I think is true here too. It's just snappier. And I think, especially coming off of New X-Men, that was something that was needed. These characters needed a dose, a huge injection of big personality, and they got that here. They're quippier a little bit funnier. Even Emma and Kitty, they have great character dynamics, and the way they cross is all fantastic. I think that from a dialogue standpoint and a character interaction standpoint, there's just nothing to criticize.
Sorry, Sean. I didn't like it. I'm a huge Buffy fan, and I like Firefly and Serenity and stuff like that. And I think Whedon dialogue works differently in a comic because the dialogue takes up space. Anytime you have characters on the page, everyone is saying something. Like if you have all of your X-Men on this page, everyone has a word balloon and they're bouncing back and forth. And I think it is distracting. I'm not sure it translates as well in comic form.
I'm with you to a degree. I do agree with Sean that sort of in the first arc, at least things feel a bit more defined. I do feel like each character is true to who they are, and it feels like things are quick and snappy. And again, right down the barrel. But then like especially once like Agent Brand gets like really involved, and we start seeing more of her, just like there are just little asides that are just like no person would say that. And it just like it feels too far even for Whedon.
Yeah, it's like people know when to shut up, besides me.
I'm even maybe like to a little more on Sean's side. Like I think the way people bounce back to each other is pretty natural. I think it is snappy. I think it makes for good comic relief when there is, and then also it makes for I think good conversation when it isn't. Uh, the the thing that for me when and you said it, Kale, when Brand comes in, sometimes it starts to feel samey. Like it doesn't stay. The individuals get lost. That's the farthest maybe I'll say about the Whedon stuff. Like he's quick. I don't mind that that people are talking on the page and that there's a number of balloons. I don't think it has to be totally vacant, but it's when people start sounding the same. And I'm trying to find a page where that happens, but it's definitely in the back half. Like I want to say the end of the third arc into the fourth arc.
Marco, were you a Whedon fan in terms of like TV shows and stuff?
Yeah, man, Firefly,
Okay.
love that stuff.
Okay.
I never saw barely anything of what call it, Buffy, but Serenity, sure.
Okay, I was just curious because I'm like, oh, the sameness of dialogue is the critique that usually comes up for those shows sometimes too.
Hmm.
And I was curious if you got there organically or if it's something you've also experienced Whedon outside of this.
Here and there, it doesn't always happen, but here I caught some moments.
I really couldn't disagree more with the idea that there's too much dialogue. This is as economical as I can imagine any writer being in this situation. Cassidy draws, um, or rather, Cassiday's layouts, which I assume Whedon had a hand in, don't allow for that kind of dialogue. Most of the book is 4 to 5 panel pages, and the focus is on the art. If anything, I think Whedon himself in an interview that I had pulled said he wrote the barest scripts he's ever written in his life, and I think that's pretty evident. I think that he hones in largely on what characters need to say, the point they need to get across, and there's room for jokes. Especially when you compare it to I'm not even going to name names, but my God, Jesus, this is a walk in the park.
Sure.
I'm not gonna name names. He says, "My God and Jesus." Come on, come on. What are we doing?
They're chatty guys. They got how many books you need?
Ki-
No, I think I'm with you. Like nothing feels so much like that. We're not seeing like massive balloons that take over the whole page. But for me, in certain moments, like I said, there were just bits that felt unnecessary. Like they could have been edited just a little bit tighter. And maybe that's an editing thing and not a Whedon thing. But you know,
Yeah, I don't feel it was really blocking the art as much as whenever like the art had to be laid out in a certain way that everyone had a spot for a word balloon. Um,
But that's comics.
I know, but like Beast didn't need to talk in the situation. Like he'd said something, didn't add anything. It just felt like he had to talk because he was there. Um, can we talk about Wolverine? Because I don't like Whedon's Wolverine. I think he is becomes lowest common denominator of what Wolverine is, and he's the comedy relief of this. I mean, we'll get to the arc with the Hellfire stuff, which is, oof. But I don't care much for his Wolverine throughout this. Like his whole thing is like angry, need beer, and sure that kind of leads to him kind of being like a weird teacher, which with Hisako, but that doesn't come until a little later on. I was not a fan of his Wolverine in this. My
Do you
least
feel
favorite
like
characterization out of the 5, 6.
do you feel some of that like badass nature gets lost?
I don't even need it to be badass. I think just Wolverine can be lighthearted. It just feels like this is a very dumbed down synthesization of who Wolverine is as a character.
Yeah, it's surface level, and I think when you're working on team books, a lot of times you have to choose who the sacrifice is, and choosing the guy who was the star of 2 X-Men movies, and people are already familiar with and doesn't need a lot of character work, is appropriate. I think he put his focus on the characters that needed help. Kitty was coming back, Colossus was dead, Cyclops needed rehabbing. So I think he really puts the focus on them and Wolverine wasn't going to not be a part of the team. He was always going to have to be here for sales, if nothing else. And so, I don't know.
I also think some of the the funnier moments with Wolverine also show sort of a different side to his personality that we don't always get.
Sure.
Like the bit where he's where they're fighting the monsters and he's we have their whole plan or whatever, and everybody's thinking these certain things. It's early on, issue 7 or 8, I think. And he's Wolverine's thrown into the building and he launches himself off and he doesn't have a thought balloon until the very last one. And his last one is like, I like beer. And for me, that was like, it kind of shows how often he's in this situation that he just reacts. He lets his body just do its thing. And were he to overthink it, it would complicate it. So, like, I don't know. I felt that it was sort of an expression of like how calm that character is in these types of situations.
Like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's talk about the second arc. Let's talk about Danger. So, this arc is framed around the idea that the Danger Room itself is sentient and that it is angry with Professor Xavier, and it basically was created only to, test and kill mutants. And so now the sentient version wants a body, and it uses what it has, which is the Danger Room, the place where all the mutants go to train, in order to, make things happen to get itself a body. And it uses the character Wing, who was had the mutant cure forced on him, in the first arc. And it kind of gets creepy, and there's like a horror element to it. For anybody who's seen Age of Ultron or watched Buffy season 4, clearly Joss Whedon has something he wants to say about AI, but I don't think that he ever really gets to the place where he says exactly what that is. I think Age of Ultron is the closest. Um, Danger is the least well liked arc of this whole run. It's my least favorite personally. It's also the arc that Whedon has spoken about the most in terms of the criticism that he has received about it. And I wanted to quickly talk about something that he said. So he was asked, "What's the most important thing you've learned since entering the comics industry?" And he said, "Stay off the internet," as Jeff Johns very seriously told me when I was first starting. He said that it's actually probably the second. The most important is probably I had an interesting time with my second arc with Danger. It was not as well received as the first arc. A lot of people loved it. A lot of people really didn't. While there are things that I think work beautifully and stuff that I'm enormously proud of, it was interesting to look at it with a critical eye and ask, what did I not give the X-Men audience? I was sort of adjusting from the first arc and going, well, they talked a whole lot, so let's have some more SmackDowns. And suddenly there was, where's all this talk? It's similar to what I learned on Buffy, the soap opera. The character stuff is much more important than the ideas I have in my head about the nature of reality and the artificial intelligence. There was stuff in there that I thought was fascinating, but ultimately what people want is the X-Men, and all the other stuff is gravy. It was a bit of a rearing back for me, but it was also kind of liberating because I've never done something, except I think season 6 of Buffy, that people were so critically on the fence about. I've never really been that big of a fan of this arc myself. I often actually skipped over this arc when I would do my rereads. I would go from 1 to 3 to 4. But I think it exposes a problem that pretty much is universally accepted about the Whedon Cassidy time on Astonishing, which is that Whedon's villains are not good. they're not very good. And I would extrapolate that and go on to even say that even if you consider Buffy, the villains on Buffy are a mixed bag.
Yep.
Um, Loki in Avengers is just Loki, and a lot of people didn't care for Ultron. So to me, Whedon's biggest strength is his character work and his interplay between characters, the dynamic and the drama. What he's not so great at is the villain stuff. And especially with the edict, the personal edict, to bring new villains into the fold every arc, with the I guess not the third, but otherwise, that was the weakest element.
It. I don't hate this. What's the name of the arc? Is it just called Danger?
Danger.
Yeah, I don't hate it, but it does feel disjointed. Like I like the whole horror house when the danger room kind of swallows up these kids, and there's a bit of a horror element there. I hate what happens with Wolverine in that. It's just hard to read. The characterization there. I understand the point of it, but it was just hard to read for me. But I like how Beast is devolving, and Scott's vegetable at this point. I thought that was interesting, and it made Kitty step up.
Sorry,
That's
is
the
that the
third
next arc? Yeah.
Is it the third arc? So when is the? Okay, I'm getting them mixed up. A lot of the danger room stuff, but when they're in that, those kids are locked up after Wing dies, and Danger kind of kills him. Doesn't really, but doesn't stop his death from happening, which then breaks her code in a way. I didn't mind that, and then it goes to Genosha, and it's like, whoa, hold on now. It feels like two arcs within an arc. And I think it really just throws me for a loop. Because I also don't mind the Genosha stuff. Like the whole once Professor X shows up again, and they have Whedon kind of has his, thesis on who Professor X is as a person, which Gillen stole, or not stole, but homaged in the end of his Krakoa run. Pretty directly quotes some Whedon stuff here. And how it posits that maybe Professor X isn't the greatest person ever. I enjoy that, but it just feels like two different stories being told in one arc.
I like this arc better than the first one, but I think every single one of these arcs, the last two issues, just were a decline. Like he doesn't know how to wrap things up. He wraps them up very cleanly, but they don't come with a lot of drama involved. This arc ends with actually the Sentinel realized how terrible his actions were and has to go think about it. Okay, like they fall very flat. And I think that becomes the issue with all of these, is that the resolution is it's half-hearted, and that I think hurts the initial start, because I agree, I love that horror aspect. I thought, oh my god, this is so cool that the Danger Room's coming back, and it was fun to reread, because these were the only two arcs that I had read previously, and so it was cool to be like, oh my god, that's right, this happens. Oh yeah, that's right. Danger does take it to this level. Danger is a concept to begin with. That's so cool. That's really novel. And then it just, all right, actually, my bad. I'm so sorry. Like I really hurt you guys. I'm gonna bye, and that just falls flat.
And even the bit that posits that Danger is a mutant in a way herself is it's introduced, but never really goes anywhere.
Dropped.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate the arc. I think I liked it more this time around, but what really hurt it for me was what Marco was saying about the resolution. Whenever we see, so Sentinels to me are scary. I find them to be scary. And whenever they appear, I always have a visceral reaction because I understand what a sentinel represents to the mutants. And this is still at a time, at least in this particular book, where one sentinel by itself is a legitimate threat to a team of X-Men because they're not so overpowered that they just, wreck them like we saw in during Krakoa. And so I really, really love the battle with the Sentinel that they have a little earlier on in the arc. I thought that was excellent.
Rad.
Really great fight sequence.
It's scary too. It's menacing, right?
Exactly. I love, love, love Sentinels. And then when they go to Genosha and knowing what just happened, again, if you take your brain and you put yourself in 2004, you have just come off the heels of New X-Men where the Genoshan genocide happened.
Yep.
So this is a return to that. And for me, I was like, oh shit, like what must it feel like to be there and to see these things? And then when Kitty uses her powers to phase them all out to save themselves, that shit was crazy.
Wild.
Unbelievably cool.
Yeah.
But again, it's the deeper layers that Whedon just doesn't nail. Why is Danger like this? You know, what does he mean by it's mutating? Why does the Wild Sentinel have, like, I get it, but I don't get it. Like, it's not dealt with in any way. It's just, well, the Wild Sentinel has sentience now and it has thoughts, so it's bummed out about what it did. That's goofy without a deeper explanation.
Well, and it that made me think of what we addressed with the sort of recent DC books, right? Like, you know, the this all-time one super crazy villain shows up and it took everything for the hero to beat them. You know, in this case, it wiped out, you know, the majority of the mutant population. And it's here, and oh my god, but it was reprogrammed and it gained a conscience, so it left. Where's the threat there? You know, where's the like if you could do that now, why didn't you do it then?
It felt very much like Poochie from The Simpsons. It's that bit where the dog character on Itchy and Scratchy says, "I have to go back to my people now," and gets abducted by aliens, and then it just goes away without any real resolution.
I liked where they were going with Kitty going inside it, and the idea being Kitty wasn't there when this went down, and they were ambushed on Genosha. But now Kitty's here, and Kitty is the answer to the Wild Sentinel. She can deal with this. I was like, okay, that's sick. I'm with that. But then the idea that it just like, I'm out of here. That didn't work, and it really took the heat away from me for this arc. Even though once again, I absolutely love the character drama.
And not to jump forward to the last two issues of the run, but he comes back, you know, and even then that doesn't feel like a good resolution to it either. Like even when it's brought back to maybe be addressed again, no.
Yeah. And there's something playing in the background with Emma where, you know, they're essentially teasing the idea that she's gone heel, that someone is pulling her strings, and all that is established, you know, fairly early on. Even the idea that she brought Kitty on the team because she didn't trust herself, someone to keep her in check, which I sort of like. I like the idea of that. And then that goes on to become, you know, the essential issue of the third arc, which is Torn. Before we talk about that, I wanted to talk about the delays that this series experienced. This series was incredibly delayed. I said from 2004 to 2008. That is 4 years. Now, on average, comics come out once a month. So you get about 12 issues per year. And in 4 years, you would expect to have gotten what, 48 issues? They only managed to do 25. So the 24 of Astonishing plus giant sized Astonishing #1. This was shipping bi-monthly, so every other month. At a certain point after this arc, going into Torn was shipped bi-monthly for the first 4 issues, and then the idea was that they would get back to monthly, but they never really were able to keep a great schedule. To this day, we don't know why. Because Whedon says that his scripts were ahead of schedule. The editors say that John Cassaday was never late. So to this day, we don't know what caused all the delays. I've seen it alleged that it was because of upheaval happening behind the scenes at Marvel. Personally, I don't buy any of that. I think Whedon was probably just late. But I don't know. Who knows? We'll never know.
Because this is pre-Disney buyout, right?
Yep.
So even the whole usual reasons why X-Men were an issue, had issues in the comics because of the movies, it's not even applicable here.
Yeah. Either way, that doesn't affect us now, but if you were reading at the time, you know what I'm talking about. You know how brutal these delays were.
And I was, and it's why I don't remember most of the latter half, genuinely, because I was like, I think I read Gifted and Danger probably in trade, and then after that, I was hyped for the issues to come out, and I would get one, ooh yeah, devour it, cool, and then they just kind of petered off, and I remember waiting for the finale forever.
Yes.
And then I got to the finale and I was like, oh, that wasn't worth it.
Huge wait.
And
Yep.
it was so frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk more about the finale in a little bit. Let's talk about Torn. So this arc essentially is the Emma Frost heel turn arc. She has aligned herself with the Hellfire Club, which now consists of Cassandra Nova, Emma herself, Sebastian Shaw, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, not looking like she does today by any stretch, and a shadowy figure that gets revealed a little bit later on to be Emma. And the idea here is that a piece of Cassandra Nova still lives and has infected the mind of Emma Frost and is causing her to, act out and work on behalf of Cassandra. A direct holdover from the new X-Men Cassandra Nova, a character that was introduced there. I really love this arc. I remember being obsessed with this arc when it was first coming out. I was obsessed because I love Cassandra Nova. I was ready for Emma to be bad because I did not like Emma Frost. I'm a Jean Grey guy.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I was pissed off that Emma was here. When they resurrected Colossus, I thought it was going to be Jean. When it wasn't, I was tight. And the fact that in this arc, Emma cosplays as Jean and Cyclops is mine pissed me off. I was just angry the whole time. I don't even know if I ever got over this. It took me a long time to like Emma. Probably not until Hoxpox did I like Emma Frost, actually. I'm a hater. I am an Emma Frost hater. Not anymore, but I was. Reformed.
This was my least favorite arc.
Yeah.
I didn't think it played all too well with how I understood the construction of it. Emma had to be bad. And then she brings in the Hellfire Club. All right, good shout out, cool. But then a lot of the reveals felt similarly just kind of convoluted. Like, oh, actually, it just turned out it was all in her mind, and you never saw them fight. You never saw them in the room at the same time, kind of thing. And then actually, it was Cassandra Nova all along. I would have much rather it had just been her leading this and taking over Emma, and then the split personality between her and Emma as well, between like a split personality of herself, confused me. So I didn't feel like this was the clearest of the arcs from a narrative standpoint.
Dude, it has no ending. like what happens to Cassandra Nova at the end of this is not explained.
Sure. Oh yeah. Doesn't she get put back in this line?
They don't say. It was it was always, is Emma gonna put Cassandra in Hisako's body? That was an option. Or was Emma gonna enter? I don't know. Nobody knows. It has no clear ending for no narrative reason. You could have a non-clear ending for a reason, but this just drops it. This is, again, it's the same issue with every arc, I feel, is that it gets there, and it just falls off a cliff. It does a full wing, and just falls to its death at the end of every arc. I don't like this arc at all.
Is that an okay thing to say?
I mean, he's dead. He's not gonna complain about it. I don't like this arc at all. Honestly, this didn't do anything for me. Like, even like as you talk about the MO of kind of getting away from New X-Men to then bring back the New X-Men villain, seems counterintuitive to its original mission statement. I don't like how it's so stuck in the school. And I think my distaste for this arc is because I wanted what the first arc told me the book was going to be. It was going to be a superhero book. It's like a bottle issue for an arc.
2 arcs.
Yeah, 2. Yeah, back to back, minus little Genosha, run.
Jaunt.
But yeah, I didn't care much for this at all. Like the Wolverine of it all. The only thing I liked was that Beast would come up with a cure for going crazy. That's a cat, ball of yarn. I thought that was a funny bit. But outside of that, yeah, I didn't like this.
So I think the arc does a lot of interesting things. It gives us more Hisako armor, and I really like her. I can't even really think of another story of hers where she's a factor that I love, but this is one of them. I like how she's the only one of the kids to step up, and just do, I thought that was really cool. The mutants, obviously, like, there's always a young mutant, but Kitty can't be the young mutant forever. And so Joss tried to, further that legacy by giving us armor, and I thought she was really effective. And Wolverine immediately developing a dynamic with her is also really funny, and I appreciated that. The Cyclops Reed episode, the issue where Emma reads Cyclops is so good. So good. She tears my man down. She literally shut him down.
Do they ever explain why he loses his powers temporarily? Is he just at like ED?
No, she shuts it off.
I think she shut him off.
But he could just turn it back on eventually? Because she doesn't turn it back on for him.
Right, yeah, that because then Emma doesn't know that happens. That doesn't get explained.
He overcomes it, yeah.
Somehow Palpatine returned. Got it.
Yeah, it was a very weak explanation, I think, to get to a point where she could christen him with his visor again. But it was basically like, oh yeah, I held out specifically so I could have that big moment.
Yeah, it's also just like, Spider-Man losing his powers for no reason and then gaining them back when he feels better, comic stuff. Issue 15 is fantastic to me. Watching the Hellfire Club shit on the X-Men, Wolverine being chased around by Beast, I thought that was so funny. Because it's a flip. You expect that Wolverine is just gonna, go berserk and tear shit up, and that's not at all what happens. And I like the fact that he was able to, do something a little different with Wolverine. And then the end of that issue, come on, man. If you're a longtime X-Men fan, when Kitty is in the fucking basement in the water and she's got her hands up, that is a direct callback to Claremont's X-Men, where Wolverine is in that exact same position in the Hellfire Club. That shit was tight.
Yep.
So cool. And then Cyclops with the gun.
I don't like that.
You don't like anything. Cyclops with the gun was sick as hell. Cyclops with the gun? Get it up, Cyclops? Please. Please.
It felt,
when did he learn how to use it?
It felt dissonant. I don't know. He's just walking around, pop. Oh yeah, and then this, pop. Haha. Now you pop. Haha. Like,
yeah. Like, where did he learn how to use a gun? Like, this is a guy who had gun eyes, essentially. He never had use for it, I don't know.
Tyler, they're not really there.
That is a poor
it's
critique.
Not that hard to use a gun. Like,
yeah, I don't understand.
But, like, I don't know. it didn't feel right. It's like monkey with a gun situation. I don't know. Didn't make him cooler, in my opinion.
Wait, is that why he was shooting them?
Yeah, they weren't there.
No, but was he shooting them to prove that they weren't there?
No, I thought he thought they were there. He was just trying to. He had no powers at that point. He had to result to human arms.
Oh, right. Okay.
I think that Cyclops losing his powers and then just going ape shit and grabbing the gat, those were all things that I think Whedon was doing to show that Cyclops is extremely resourceful and that he's not just his power set. He can't be reduced like that. He is the leader of the team. And a part of how Whedon proves that is by taking away from him his biggest strength, or what people perceive to be his biggest strength. That's not his biggest strength. His biggest strength is his ability to be a tactician and sure-footed and sure of mind in any given situation, which is why him being the one to solve this makes so much sense.
Yeah. Roboter said Cable showed Scott a thing or two about guns. Okay, that's a justification I'll go with. Yeah.
Because anybody can't just pick up a gun. Why are we talking about that?
Again, it's not that hard.
Yeah, I love this arc. I think it's a lot of fun. But there's only one more arc to go. Because the way this ends, which I agree, the ending of this is not great. The mutants just get sucked up onto a ship to go to the break world. And what they leave behind is all the conflict that was happening on Earth. Ord is playing in the background of all this. We're getting sword stuff with Abigail Brand, who I believe this is her first appearance. And I really love her. I think she's great. And she goes on to become a very consistent supporting character playing in the background of X books. But yeah, we get to the final arc, Unstoppable. And to me, this is another one that, I like, but it is a bit uneven. It's got its issues as well. I love the stuff with Cyclops. I think all that is great. I love the Kitty Colossus drama. Basically everything I've been loving, I still love. The problem is that there's just not enough time. We're on a whole new planet, and I just don't feel like here there's enough time to establish, what kind of world is this? Like Whedon does enough of that. He does some of that. I don't know if he does enough of that. It's established here that Colossus is going to end the break world. He's going to destroy it, and the reason why all this alien stuff has been going on is because simply these people are worried about being killed. It's a prophecy that they believe. There's a twist thrown in that the prophecy is actually something that was implanted upon them by one of their own people who wants this all to end because the people of the break world suck and they're just violent people who need to die. Which is fine, but ultimately it's hard to care because we don't even know these people.
And it definitely doesn't help that they all look like boogers.
Like Mucin X-Men?
Yeah, like the design, we said it earlier with Ord, but every single one of these alien characters just look like lumpy green people.
And even Ord is consistently throughout this whole series, and he's still a thing in here. I wouldn't call him a threat. But like he almost becomes comical by the end, and then we're supposed to feel for him towards it, where it feels like maybe if Whedon was cooking a little longer and could stretch that out a bit more. But yeah, I do feel like this was like rushed to an ending.
Yeah, Ord was definitely a joke, and I think that was deliberate. Whedon has a tendency to do this kind of thing with characters. Look at Spike from his first appearance to later on in season 2, he's a wheelchair bound. Not that that's a joke, but it's played for a joke in the show that he's impotent because he's wheelchair bound, and he's a cuck because Drusilla is hooking up with Angel, and he's a comedy bit at that point. So I think that's
time.
Yeah, it's a different time. And that's just Whedon's MO. The problem is that the character who's supposed to supplant Ord Brune isn't
Yeah.
any better in terms of having some kind of definition to him or being more inherently threatening.
From a design standpoint, he's Ord with weird eyebrows. Like, I had trouble keeping track of who was who sometimes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because even what makes Ord slightly unique early on, you know, the red hood and the thing across his nose or whatever, like he loses all that, so he just gets lost in the shuffle, in the Kleenex, and it's just hard to, you know, it's hard to keep up.
I was on the hook for the brand stuff of this arc. The fact that she had her own angle, and you know, we were trying to was trying to play it something beyond even them, and then you get to realize that they have this giant weapon, which you have to try to, you know, suss out where it is and ultimately defeat. Uh, but then that part where it all leads up into the prophecy, it just took so much of the wind out of the sails for me, because it felt, this was the one arc I felt so contrived. Everything was like all around Colossus, who got resurrected by chance, and it turned out that um, Ord was his own, you know, his own worst enemy and bringing it back. But somehow there was a prophecy, and these psychics were able to forecast that. And I, yeah, it was this fell out. This kind of went off the rails for me.
And even like the actual plot of the book is supposed to be contrived. He's almost writing the contrivances in as the story. Like the whole idea of the Colossus thing that's been the thing looming the entire series is contrived. What we thought it was contrived turns out, yeah, it was. Which seems like a cop out, you know?
I didn't hate that.
I mean,
I thought, you know, I thought it was an interesting twist, because I spent the whole read going, well, how? It's Colossus. What are you talking
He
about?
punches things. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a metal guy. What's the big deal? Um, but that being the ending is like, oh, okay, of course. And it, like, you know, it's not like, it's satisfying because Colossus figures it out, and, you know, like, we couldn't put it together.
yeah, I thought it was a cool twist, but again, 6 issues is not a lot in comics.
Yeah.
And it's not a lot when you're doing 4 to 5 panels a page. And to me, this book suffers from just not being long enough. And Whedon is used to working at this point, certainly in television, where on Buffy he was getting 22 episode seasons. So you can really sprawl out and tell your story. I feel like the effects of not having that kind of time are very evident throughout this run. This needed to be, this last arc, I think, needed to be 2 arcs to give it the time to, who are these break world people, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. It just feels like it needed more room. And because it doesn't have that, it's moments. But for me, when it comes to Whedon, I always get hooked on the character stuff. So, you know, Emma telling Cyclops, I love you now. That was a big deal to me. That got me. I love that.
Did she say that? I know Cyclops says it to her on the ship. And she kind of goes catatonic. Does she reciprocate?
Well, she's always said it, but he was the one that I don't think had ever said it back.
Yeah, because
right. Yeah. Okay. Cyclops says it, right?
Because I had to relook at that panel, because it's like you gotta be real specific where that tail is pointing for that word balloon, because that made me do a double take as well.
Yeah, I love. Yeah, I love that. I love the Beast and Brand stuff. Oh my god! Like, just inject romance and drama between superheroes while they're saving the world into my veins. That's the stuff that I think Joss does as well as anybody.
They hooked up, right? In the snow?
No, she showed him her mutant power.
Oh, I thought she got kind of
that was
like,
the surprise.
You know,
Like, she's a mutant.
Give me that. Yo, I need that
Is
fur.
Brand a mutant? No, she's an alien.
She's an alien mutant.
That's why I was reading it. She's an alien, but she's like it's some kind of mutation as well.
Yeah, like Brew is a brood who's a mutant. So I think mutantum is trans alien. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, so if you only read what is labeled Astonishing X-Men, right? Then you get to 24, you read 24, and then if you tried to go to 25, it is a completely different run. It's the Warren Ellis run, and that's very, very different.
It was a jarring jump.
Yeah.
I had to do some Googling. I was like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm. You have to shift gears and go over to giant size Astonishing X-Men to get the finale of this story. So that drops in July. That drops in July of 2008. And issue 24 drops in, let me see if I can find it. January. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That is an enormous gap. That is a huge gap. If that happened today to a big two comic, there would be a massive uproar. And there was. People were pretty upset. It wasn't a situation where people were quiet about it. But yeah, it took that long for it to come out. And quite frankly, as far as endings go, it's not amazing. It's not astonishing. It's got a whole bunch of cameos of various Marvel characters. I kind of like the Spider-Man bit of it, but it just feels like it all of a sudden gets huge and it has all these people in it.
Yeah.
But then sort of the X-Men aren't alone in resolving the problem. Like they should be the ones to ultimately deal with this.
Well, and they even prevent other people from helping solve the problem.
Can I
like
get?
I-
sorry, I just
go
want a
ahead.
clarification on something. What? So there's the whole bit, which takes up a decent amount of pages of other Marvel heroes in this kind of mindscape, thinking they saved the day with this bullet. What is happening there?
It's Emma.
Is it
What's
Emma doing it?
Yeah. Is my
Why?
understanding.
Yeah, I was also trying to figure that out.
I thought it was like
Why-
the defense matrix of the bullet or something.
Yeah. I thought that's what it was.
Because it was magic based.
Which magic comes out of nowhere. They're like, well, magic. Magic is also the name of Colossus' sister. Oh wait, there you go.
Right, because it's magic based, right? Because they're like, okay, the Rasputin they need to be here was Ileana, and then Doctor Strange is the first one to interact. He gets like
Super
whatever,
shocked or whatever.
shocked or something. But then if you look at that panel, because I just flipped to it, it shoots something out at everybody else.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. So they're under the effects of the bullet, which, again, you talk about contrived. That's the thing that stands out to me as contrived.
Yeah.
I think that the issue would have been better served by just not including them. It's funny because I'm going to read a quote a little bit later about how Whedon doesn't like the intersection of stories and characters in comics. But yet he spends an ample amount of time showing why the Earthbound heroes can't deal with this. And I just didn't think that made a lot of sense to show that.
And it was room he could have used.
Yeah.
Even the sudden introduction of like Storm, Nightcrawler, and Angel, who are on the cover as well, like with the team, feels like, oh, these are characters he wanted to introduce later on. And
yeah. That aside, though, I mean, it's an ending. It gives us the big hero moment for Kitty where she's the only one who can stop this from happening, which I like. It's a little nuts, the idea. And I didn't like the fact that it took Kitty off the board, even though she wasn't gone for that long. But I didn't love that it took her off the board. But outside of that, it's fine. I don't know if they stuck the landing. I don't think it lives up to what the rest of the series had been. But again, on the emotional character level, I still love it.
And especially coming off a long delay, it definitely wasn't worth it.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That delay, dude. That
I
delay.
genuinely I finished that and went, oh, okay, I could be done with this.
Yeah. So ultimately, that's it.
Astonishingly.
Astonishingly. That's it. And I feel like, to me, the way I sum up this run in my mind is this is a perfectly good X-Men comic. It's not offensive. It's not over the top. It's not heady. You're not going to get lost in the sauce like many people did with Morrison's run. And it's short enough that you could get through this in a weekend. And great. But it's not that ambitious. In fact, I would say it's ambitious in its desire to go the other direction from the direction that Morrison went. Like, that's the ambition. It has a different kind of ambition. And the lasting impacts of this run are pretty much non-existent because of the fact that it was so desperate to avoid the Marvel Universe. Whedon has talked about wanting this to be as accessible as possible. And that was, I mean, it depends on the kind of reader you are, but that could either be a big problem for you or it could be something that you love. It doesn't address House of M or the Decimation, which happened a year after this. That completely shits on the Cure, by the way. That could be a reason why he doesn't address it again. But he talks about not being that pleased with the fact that happened. It doesn't interact with Civil War. It doesn't interact with the 198. It doesn't interact with any of that at all. And all of that was happening at this time.
I feel like they vaguely mention Civil War, but it's a line.
It's a passing, yeah.
Blink and you miss it.
Let me read a couple of quotes from him. Whedon said, he was asked, how will House of M or Decimation be reflected in the arcs? He said, only marginally. I had pitched my arcs out before House of M was created, and there was some dissonance reading them. I was like, I don't know if the things I will be referring to will matter as much to people. That's part of why I've got such an internalized story. I've sort of removed myself so that I don't clash with what's going on. In a way, I've just kind of avoided the issue because, as I said, I've had these things worked out well in advance. But yeah, I worked this stuff out before, and then obviously huge changes came with House of M, and I have to kind of ignore them, but never contradict them. I'm just going to do my thing.
Well, if it had come at a normal, pace, it might not have been as evident, really.
Well, if you say 24, we'll say 25 issues spread out over the course of 2 years, then that's 2004 to 2006, which still sees it intersect with House of M because that only came a year later. And it would potentially happen during Civil War's opening salvos. But by 2008, Astonishing feels like a relic because of how different the world of the X-Men are.
Yep.
So by choosing to be so insular, he dated himself. But that only applies if you are looking at the Marvel Universe holistically. Anybody who buys Astonishing X-Men right now gets a story that works unto itself. So it's a gift and a curse. But it clearly upset Whedon because he doesn't want to go back to Marvel. This is a quote. He's asked, are there any other Marvel properties you'd like to work on? He says, I think my Marvel time is winding down. That's not to say there are no properties, but right now, everything is so connected that I can't get my head around it. Obviously, this is doing great business for Marvel and DC and bringing out some of the best writing and some of the enormous event stuff. Identity Crisis was amazing and spun out a bunch of stuff. That's really cool. But I kind of like it when the Hulk's doing his own thing and Cap's doing his own thing. And you buy it once a month and get excited. Everything is so complicated that, and then he goes on to give some examples. There are definitely characters I like, but I have no idea if they're going to be dead, rebooted, ultimated, or just wearing a black costume by the time I get to them.
When was this said, John?
This is when the run ended.
Okay, it was like a posthumous of his run. Okay. I think it's kind of ironic to then be the guy that does the Avengers movie.
Yeah. But even then, Avengers 1 and 2 are only really connected to each other.
Yep.
They were specifically designed so that you could watch Avengers 1 and 2 without feeling lost. And it kind of ignores, I mean, not fully, but it doesn't take into account all the things that happened between the first and second one, which a lot did happen. It's sort of similar to this.
I think that's also a massive problem with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Right. It's insular.
That's true, yeah. Wanted to be its own sandbox.
But I think
he wanted it to be his own.
Yeah,
sandbox.
exactly, yeah.
But I think for it being a new reader friendly, to somebody who just wants something consumable within its own kind of pocket, I think that works, because that's what I read it as. This was given to me by a friend years and years ago to be like, just check it out. And I think you can do that. So I think it's successful in that. But if you want that extension, or that maybe like doorway into the rest of the world, it mostly doesn't exist. But that's fine.
I think it is fine. I think it's fine. I think it's weird, though, and it represents how much Marvel was changing at the time, that the mission statement of the book isn't reflected anywhere else. Turning the X-Men into superheroes doesn't really exist outside of Astonishing. And 1 year later, they would decimate the mutants to the point where they're fighting for their survival, and there is no time to be a superhero team. The stories are absolutely not about that. And that's just 1 year later.
Who picks it up? Cy Spurrier with a Spider-Man Nightcrawler?
After Whedon?
Well, I'm trying to think of like the idea of X-Men as superheroes.
I think you'll be very surprised, actually. Warren Ellis.
Wait, that picks up
Picks
that
up
plot thread or
Astonishing.
the book? No, I know he picks up the
He
book.
picks up
Yeah.
Astonishing.
Yeah.
Oh,
I meant more the idea of superheroes being the MO of the X-Men.
I don't think
geez,
that
Jerry Duggan, like in
yes.
Krakoa.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
point.
Jerry Duggan's run was supposed to be that. If you read the book, it's not
Oh.
really like that. Well, I don't blame you. It's not really like that. And so I don't think that Marvel has ever really like made a true effort to go back to that, which is funny because the absolute best time to do that would have been during the dark years where they were not allowed to do anything and progress them forward.
Yeah.
That's so bizarre that they didn't do that then. But
Monster of the Week type, and but then you have to develop characters.
You can still do both.
I have a prickly question
sure.
that I just want to put out here that I'm not sure if we'll be able to answer, because we're all sort of experienced comics readers. If in Marco's scenario, someone just gave him this arc, and it was very digestible, and he went on. Great, it's the X-Men. Would this make you want more X-Men? Because after reading it, I don't know if it did. I don't think it did for me, at least not in this form. Like, I didn't keep going with Astonishing.
I think the issue is because I'm with you. Like if I can try and put myself there again, it's hard.
Yeah,
But it doesn't build the world of the X-Men to really make me care about it. It builds Break World, but Ooh,
That it breaks it.
yeah, like what do we have? One mansion that we see a couple hallways and a danger room for? Like there's no real world building for mutants.
The one-liners are cool. The power sets are cool.
I mean, for me, this didn't make me want to. This felt like oh, cool, that was fun. Now I have to go pick up the rest of the, because by the time that I read this, it would have been 2010 maybe. So,
Mm.
the first two arcs didn't even make me want to keep going and finish the run. I was like, oh, that was cool. I got what I got out of this, and that's it. I don't think it attracted me enough to the concept of X-Men.
I think it's tough because generally speaking, if a person likes something, they're going to want more of it.
Right.
So my answer would be if they liked it, then yes. There's nowhere else that you could really get this flavor of X-Men because again, it was a mission statement that didn't exist among the rest of the X line. So if you like this and want more of this specifically, there's nowhere to get that. But I don't think that, like, I think if you like, let's say, Wolverine, and you want more Wolverine adventures, then you'll do what most people will do and go buy another Wolverine book, or you'll go find whatever the next big X story was and go get that. So I kind of think the answer is just if you liked it, then yes. If you didn't, then no. But ultimately, that's the story of Astonishing X-Men. I think it exists in a very interesting spot in Marvel's X line because it's between two very big epochs. You have the new X-Men era, and then after this is the Decimation era. Well, alongside this, and then after this is the Decimation era. And this sits in between those. And I think that that is fascinating because of how little it has to say about anything happening around it. But I think that does make it what it set out to be, which is an essential or a acceptable, digestible, quintessential X-Men story that is perfectly good, but it never gets to that higher plateau. For me, I love it, but I love Joss Whedon's work. So it hits every benchmark that I want out of Whedon's stuff. But I don't think it elevates itself beyond that.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't have that next, the thing that makes it that next level. It doesn't have the gravitas of a Hox Pox and the message and like there's different elements to it, but there's a difference between this, which is acceptable, passable. It's good work, but that doesn't make it great work or amazing work.
Yeah, this sits perfectly in fine territory for me. It's fine. This is like I don't know why I think about this, but like if I saw it in a library, I'd I'd open it up and read it. I think in the reread, the current context for Joss Whedon as a person definitely clouded my reading of this. There are some bits in this book where it's like, oh, that is not something you say in a comic. And that contextualization of like him kind of being a creep that we know about now definitely affected my reading. Because I was a huge Joss Whedon fan. But after this read through, I'm like, for me, the good thing is the art. I like Cassaday's art enough to enjoy this, but it's a lot of start and stops with me in this book.
I did mean to point out earlier that this book actually won an Eisner for best continuing series in 2006.
Wow.
And yeah, and Cassaday won, well, he won in 2005 for best penciler inker. He was actually tied with Frank Whiteley, which is funny. Um and then he won again in 2006 for the same thing for this book. So, an Eisner Award winning book, a very interesting book in X-Men history, and I think a perfectly giftable book. So if you have an X fan in your life and you don't want to give them the insanity that is House and Powers, even though I think that, well, I was going to say I think that's the best jumping on point for the mutants, but that's no longer the case. This is a perfectly acceptable, easy book to get into for the mutants. All right. That's our portion, but we're not done. I want to turn it over to the audience. Listeners, if you guys have comments you want to leave our way, I want to go over your thoughts as well, if we can, for a few minutes here. What did you think about Astonishing X-Men? How do you guys feel about it? We've gotten a whole bunch of comments. Let's hit some of those.
Yeah, I actually pulled one or two out. So it was back in towards the beginning. Chris Coleman, great topic, guys. I read this run at the time and I remember enjoying it. Excited to relive it with you all tonight. Thanks for listening. Roboters had two here. Kitty, for so many, was that character people grew alongside and was their eyes into that world. And one thing I will say about Whedon bringing his Buffy know-how and how to give proper time and moments to an entire team setting, which I think is true. I definitely felt like everybody got to shine. Everybody got a moment. Maybe they didn't have, like, Wolverine didn't have a centralized piece, but definitely the interactions with Kitty and Armor were really cool. Obviously Emma and Cyclops. Kitty had a number of moments alongside Colossus as well. So I think there was a good distribution of time. Beast again. So that was definitely something that was felt.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the stuff he does best by far. Jack G says, he quotes me, Hoxpox is no longer the best jumping on point for X-Men. What do you think is? Well, what's impending? What's coming out in July, which is the From the Ashes stuff. I mean, that's a fresh start, and Hoxpox is, I don't want to say invalidated, but it's no longer the status quo. So I think if you're looking for something that is like, again, this is a bottle arc or period for the X-Men. You just don't need to know anything else. You don't.
It's like a bottle run, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did anyone read the stuff after this, actually?
Yes.
I remember the Marjorie Liu Astonishing X-Men being really good.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, she had a time on it.
I think she finished the run.
Warren Ellis immediately jumps on after Whedon, and Ellis's run is really weird. Like, I liked it, but it's very weird, and the art is bugged out. The art is so bugged out.
I did the jump today, and I think it's Simone Bianchi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I flipped to it and I went, "Oh, now I know why I jumped." I'm not a fan.
Is it immediately Bianchi? I'm trying to remember.
But even though, like, Cassidy to Bianchi is the most whiplash artistic switch over. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's bugged out. But it's Marco, you might like it because it's weird. It's weird and it's heady and it's bizarre.
And even the some of the paneling, I flipped through to try and figure out if there was like context for where I was before I did some Googling. But even some of the paneling I noticed was at least interesting in the first couple of pages.
Simone Bianchi?
Yep.
Okay.
What else? Syncratic, Astonishing X-Men from Whedon to Ellis, proving that the biggest plot twist can sometimes be behind the scenes. Ay. What are you gonna do? Syncratic also says, that's how I feel about it. Has some great moments and has some bad moments, but mostly it's fine. I can see that perspective, especially now, although I will say at the time, this was very, very, very popular. Astonishing X-Men was enormous. I don't know if it sold better than Morrison and Quietly, but if I was told that, it wouldn't surprise me. It's hard to underscore how big Joss Whedon was at this time.
I mean, it was like Dr. Horrible time too, right?
I think it was just before that. I was thinking about that. I would imagine Dr. Horrible is what was holding all this up.
Was Dollhouse around this time too?
Before that.
Yeah.
Before that. I remember when the shops. This was a big deal at the shops when Giant Size came out. It was like,
Mhm.
oh, finally, we're getting the end to this run. And I remember I have that issue, the Giant Size 1. And it's a thick, it had like the hard card back kind of cover from what I remember. It was a deal. It was like a big deal. So yeah, there was definitely support for it.
Aaron
Aaron-
Ruiz says, "Oh, sorry, go ahead."
Oh, that's what exactly what I was gonna read. Hello everyone. This run is kind of special to me. It didn't leave a lasting impression, but it was one of the first stories I got in my home country, at least physical, alongside Coming Home from JMS, which is arguably my favorite Spider-Man run.
Let's see. James Jones, I loved this as an omnibus. This is the book that made me a Kitty Pryde fan. Love the ending. Yeah, I really didn't know Kitty at all outside of the Kitty Pryde and the X-Men episode, the one episode pilot that they did. Outside of that, I have no context for Kitty whatsoever because she wasn't in the animated
Yeah.
series, and I didn't like X-Men Evolution, so yeah.
Claremont stuff. She's so good in it.
I hadn't read any of that at the time. Yeah.
Jack G. I really liked the subtle relationship between Wolverine and Kitty too. Got to see a different side of Logan that made his eventual dynamic with armor really rewarding. Yeah, he can play really well with a lot of characters, and I've always liked him as like this pseudo father figure, kind of a sensei to whatever. And then when Hisako speaks Japanese and like obviously says some shit to him, and he like turns and then he says something back to her. He's like,
Fires
she's
it
like,
back.
"Fuck." Yeah. She's like, "Fuck, I'm getting failed out of this." That's so good. That was really good.
Yeah, there were just so many good moments throughout this thing. Wraith says with Colossus, the how wasn't as important as the value of having him back. Whedon kind of hand waved him back from the dead, but the writing was so good it didn't matter. I think that was a lot of the sentiment, especially at the time where Colossus is a beloved figure, and he was killed rather I mean, I don't want to say he was killed unceremoniously. It was a kind of a cool, like, it was honorable how he died, but it also was manufactured. They needed to resolve the legacy virus and do it quick, and they just chose to kill Colossus because it had killed his sister. So, yeah, hand wave aside, this is something that the people wanted, and Whedon, especially in the first arc, I think was devoted to giving the audience what he thought they wanted. Or I should say, what the audience who wasn't pleased with Morrison's run wanted. Yeah. So any other good comments? Anybody have anything else to say about this? We've got one more announcement to make before we close out. One more thing we want to lay on you.
I had to make the slide during the stream because I forgot to. But yeah.
Next month is July. And Marvel, they're already neck deep in their event, their summer event. Why Blood Hunt is yeah. Why Blood Hunt is nearly at its end already is beyond me. But DC is about to launch theirs. We are getting Absolute Power starting in July. And we thought, hey, what a perfect time to do a DC event book club. That's right. July is DC event month over on the book club, and we are asking you all to use your heads if they're not cooked already by all the heat.
Oof.
Use your dome to think of the DC event that you most want us to talk about and nominate it. You can nominate it in our Discord server. You can nominate it on youtube.com/thecomicspals under the community tab when that post is up. You can nominate it for absolutely free on patreon.com/thecomicspals. All you need is an account. You do not have to pay a single cent to be able to nominate. We're going to take all the nominations and we're going to figure out the final four, the 4 books you most want us to talk about. And then our patrons will vote, and that will determine the winner of DC event month. That's the exact same system we use to determine this by the way. That's how it goes. So if you want your voice heard and you want to influence the book club, that's the way to get it done.
The only one we'll put the kibosh on is Invasion.
Invasion, because we did that, and Forever Evil. We did. Wait, no, we didn't. Did we do?
We
For-
did.
yeah,
we,
we
did,
did. Do
we did
Forever
Blackest
Evil.
Night.
Blackest Night.
We did. Oh, we did Blackest Night.
Yeah,
We didn't do
yeah.
Forever Evil.
No.
I think it was almost Forever Evil. Then it was Blackest Night.
Okay, I read Forever Evil because John's was coming on, but it wasn't a book club, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we won't do Forever Evil, or we won't do Blackest Night, Flashpoint, because why?
Good one.
Or what was the other one we said?
Heroes in
Invasion.
Crisis.
Invasion. Yeah, so those three are off. Everything else is on. So if you want us to do Sinestro Core War, if you want us to do Infinite Crisis, which I've never have I read? No, I did read that. I was about to say something.
Oh,
crazy.
I was gonna
No,
say.
I did read that. That shit was sick. It's
Yeah.
Crisis on Infinite Earths that I haven't read.
Yes.
Interesting.
Chad Cowder asked about Zero Hour.
Yes,
You know it, Hour.
On
Yes.
the table.
That's Cale's hour. That's Cale's finest hour.
The entirety of
Yeah.
Brightest Day on the table.
Oh my god, it's not an event.
Yo, give me some Death of Superman.
I feel like it'd be a short book club, but
Oh, is
Is
it?
that an event? Interesting.
I think
I
it's an
don't
event.
think so.
It was collected by itself as the Death of Superman, as like an event.
Tyler, didn't you say House and Powers isn't an event? How can you say that that Death and Return is an event, but House is not?
I'm not going to give reasoning.
I didn't think so.
We might have to look that up. I don't think that's an event.
Surely it has to be.
Aaron Ruiz says, "Let's go. Second opportunity for Heroes in Crisis, dude. We can recirculate your PowerPoint if you want to. You can drop that on the Discord, and maybe there will be a groundswell of support. But short of us somehow getting Tom King on this podcast with us, there's no reason to read Heroes in Crisis again.
And even then, we're still not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Because then we have to say not good things about it, and that wouldn't be nice.
Well, no, the art's good.
Yeah, but Tom didn't do anything with that.
It shows Lagoon Boy. Lagoon Boy fans rise up.
Oh my god, that just unlocked a dark memory. You guys don't, Marco and Cale, you don't remember I went crazy over Lagoon Boy. I was so angry about that character.
I think I do, yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
See, Chad, Nightfall, not an event. It's a Batman event.
So the Wikipedia listed as an event because it crosses over other things.
That's a crossover. Is that an event?
I'll get the page says DC Comics crossover events. So I guess maybe not. I don't know.
Interesting.
Like, Cale, would you say Messiah Complex is an event? I would.
It would be an X-Men event.
Yeah.
See, yeah, with this, I'm thinking DC line-wide event. Your
Okay.
Crisis level, your Zero Hour, your Invasion makes sense. I think if it's sort of centered around primarily a single character or a single team, that's not big enough.
X-Men's tricky because they're so segregated within themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, no Sinestro Core War.
I don't think so. That's a Green Lantern event.
I always thought it was just an arc of Green Lantern. The way my brain thinks about it.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where it's like, you'll know it when you see it.
Unfortunately, Syncratic makes a great point. Night Terrors. That's an event.
Okay. Yeah.
What is it? Beast Wars?
An event.
That's an event?
Beast
It was an
Wars.
event.
That's an event.
What about Rot World?
That's an event.
I knew that
Is
would pop,
it?
Marco.
That's an event. It
It
crossed.
did
Swamp
cross
Thing
over
event?
with
Well, but it
it crossed
crossed
over
three-
multiple titles.
Yeah. Frankenstein.
Only 3 titles?
Frankenstein, Animal Man.
Justice League, I think,
Swamp
had
Thing,
an
something
issue or
else.
two.
Just, maybe.
Yeah,
Justice League Dark.
definitely Justice League Dark. I think there was like
Okay.
single issues for a couple other things as well.
If we get votes for Rot World, I'll give you Rot World. I'm comfortable with that.
We ain't getting no damn votes for Rot World.
That's why
That's
I'm
why.
comfortable with that.
If we get a whole bunch of new Patreon subscribers that are named Kunalada, we know why Rot World is getting, votes.
All of a sudden, like, "Hey, that's weird. The numbers skewed really hard, huh?"
Would Bloodlines be an event? We might
think
have
so.
to get Hound in here to tell us about that.
I don't even know what that is.
I just have one request. Please no metal. I don't like the DC metal books.
I wouldn't have said that.
I know. As I'm saying that, I'm like, oh, I pulled a Sean with Onslaught, didn't I? Shit.
I wouldn't have said that at all because people do like that.
Robotters. Nightfall went into the 2000s? Oh, I didn't know that. That's wild.
Batman Death the Family? No, it's a Batman event.
It's a Batman event.
So basically, if it has a standalone series unto itself, it's an event.
That makes
Is that
sense.
the idea?
That makes sense.
So then how is Doomsday Clock not an event?
Watchmen book.
It's not a
Damn,
fucking
no,
Watchmen
he
book.
got you.
It's not a Watchmen book. That doesn't even make sense.
Watchmen's on the cover.
So Justice
I think
League.
Doomsday Clock
Watchmen.
fits into the whole like JL Ape isn't an event because they're not really in continuity.
Wait, we said no to Forever Evil?
No, yes to
Forever
yes
Evil.
yes
Oh.
to Forever.
Okay.
Let's talk about that good Finch art. Let's do it.
That's actually pretty good.
New Cale's reaction would be that.
Finch is fine.
If you do Infinite Crisis, could we fit 52 in there too? Uncanny, you want to kill us, but
Yeah.
Are you
Yo.
insane? I'm
Fit 52?
sweating. I'm genuinely sweating doing Crisis on Infinite Earths because I had to do these 25 issues in 3 days, and I was busting my ass. So if we have to do Crisis on Infinite Earths, as bad as I would want to host that, there's no way it could happen.
The textbook of comic book events.
That
And
is the
that's a-
Cimmerillion of events. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a book similar to Sean. What is it you read like every year?
The Bible.
There's a it's not the Bible. There's a comic
while.
you read like every year. You go back to it. We talked about it recently.
oh, man.
Anyway, I go back to Crisis on Infinite Earths often. Because I love that book.
We talk about decompressed storytelling. You want to talk about compressed?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well,
Yeah.
hey, whatever it's up to y'all. Whatever it is that you guys want us to read, the only way to make that happen is to nominate the book.
Mhm.
Nominate whatever book it is that you want. Hopefully we can get the nomination thread up tonight. That would be great. And then we can get you guys on it. I'm excited to see what you guys choose. And Uncanny Suit, I love you. There's no way in hell we're doing the 52. That's just not going to happen. As much as I would love to, I bought that fucking omnibus. Let me tell you something. I bought that omnibus
Same.
with every intention of reading it. Now, I say that to you as somebody who has not read anything of 52 at all. And I bought the omnibus sight unseen because of everything that I heard. And I have never opened it.
Still got the plastic
Never.
wrap.
Yes, most likely it is.
That
Send
spine
bad
is
boy my way.
pristine.
I love that book.
I want to read it.
That's introduction of Batwoman.
Oh, love that.
That's when Booster Gold has like a modern resurgence too.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gotta do one issue a week. Can knock it out in a year.
They retcon Ralph and Sue Dibney just very quietly in that book.
Aaron Ruiz says we need a new Marco hosted book. Choose. You want Marco to host?
I mean, no.
We can do that.
Do that.
First vote for Rot World just came in.
There it is. Did it really?
No, there's no thread.
Oh.
Doofus.
I'm like, damn, people are quick.
All right. We're going to call it a night. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. The next time we'll be live with you is tomorrow, Thursday, for Pals Pulls. We've got a lot of really good books on tap. Hopefully you guys will join us for that. 6 p.m. Eastern Thursdays, and then Saturday for the main show at 10:15 a.m. Eastern. Until then, we're the Comics Pal signing off. Take care, guys.